My name is Suzi Seglin Mogul, and I was born on September 8th, 1943, right here in Omaha, Nebraska. I was the second child. I have one older brother, Steve, who's sitting next to me, and we are the children of Sylvia and Nate Seglin. Our parents were both born here in Omaha also. And basically they worked together their whole life in a mama and papa grocery store. My dad and mother owned several grocery stores, and that is how they made their living. Steve and I went to public school, and we went to Omaha Central High School. He went on to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln and Nebraska Law School, and I studied at the University of Arizona in Tucson.
I'm Steve Seglin, Suzi's older brother. I was born October 14th, 1941. Just a little over 2 years older than my sister.
Tell me about your parents. I want to hear about your mom and dad.
Okay. Like my sister said, my mom and dad worked together for many, many years. We grew up in what I consider to be a unique kind of a setting. My mother was one of 6 children, and all 6 children, well, no, 5 of the 6 children lived in kind of a compound in separate little houses. And my grandparents lived in a house there also. So
Grandpa owned all the houses.
Yes. My grandfather owned all the houses, and 5 of the children lived there. Well, we lived there from the time we were born until I think we moved when I was in the 7th grade, so I'd been about 12 years old. Suzi would have been 10. But we grew up in that setting where we were very close to all of our uncles and aunts and our cousins. And like I said, for the first 12 years of my life, I was the oldest grandchild. There were about, I don't even want to count all of them, but I suppose together it was about 12 of us.
14.
14.
On mother's side of the family.
14
Was this
grandchildren.
grandfather on your mother?
Yes, our mother's
yes.
father.
His name was Abe McZammon, and he was born in Austria and lived in Vienna, and then immigrated to the United States, I think, when he was very, very young, 16 or 17 years old.
17, I think. Our grandfather came over with his cousin. They went through Amsterdam, and they sailed on a boat, I think it was called the Rotterdam, and they came to New York. And our grandfather stayed in New York for several years, and he worked in a factory, I think, and then he went to school at night to learn English. He eventually came to Omaha because he had an older brother that lived in Omaha.
What was his name?
Sam.
My grandfather?
No,
Sam, his brother.
Sam, his brother was Sam, but my grandfather was Abe McZammon. And he married, what was her maiden name? Habler. Annie Habler, who he tells us, her family, she came from the same area he did, and her family and his family knew each other in the old country. So it wasn't exactly an arranged marriage, but it was kind of an arranged marriage. And she had a sister that married my grandfather's brother.
So 2 brothers married 2 sisters.
So their children were like double cousins. So we had this big, huge extended family, and we had a lot of activities where we were with our aunts and our great aunts and uncles and our cousins and our second cousins. So we really grew up in really a great family on our mother's side of the family. Our dad's side of the family, my father just had one sister. He had lost a brother when his brother died when he was 15. And he had one sister, Tilly Seglin Brown Plotkin. And she had one son. So my father's family was quite a bit smaller than my mother's side of the family. And our life basically surrounded our mother's side of the family.
Who were some of the relatives, their names, that lived in this kind of complex that you guys grew up in?
Well, there was, my grandfather lived, he owned 6 houses, and my grandfather lived in one. Next to him was my mother's sister, Gert, who was married to Abe Hermanson, but they're both gone now, and they lived in California. Well, they moved there when we were real young. And then there was us. There was our uncle, Ben McZammon, who was married to Belle Green. Ben worked for Mrs. Blumkin for years. He was her very first employee. And then he rented out one house.
Right.
He rented out one house to the Andersons.
Right.
And then our Aunt Jackie and Uncle Paul lived in one of their houses. My Uncle Paul owns Malnove Incorporated, which is a huge cardboard box company. And for a while, I think our Aunt Rita and Uncle Dick lived in that house too.
No, they lived in the very last one.
That was the last one, where Jackie and Paul lived.
Oh, you're right.
And then the only one of my mother's siblings that didn't live in that house was her sister Ruth, who married a Babender from Fremont. And they always lived in West Omaha, what was really west at that time, 69th off of Dodge Street. And,
How many cousins did you have on all that lived in this little area?
Well,
We had 14.
there were 14 first cousins, but in this little area at one time, 2, 4, 6, probably
11.
8 or 11, yeah.
And you all got along well?
Oh, we
Yeah.
did. We were a very, very close family. We all went to the original Columbian grade school on 38th and Jones, and it was quite a distance from our home because we lived on 33rd and Dewey Avenue. But we walked like 9, 10 blocks to school.
And it was uphill both ways.
And we all walked together in the winter, home for lunch and back.
Now, Steve said that he was the oldest. Was he bossy?
I don't remember Steve as being bossy because I'm quite powerful myself.
Yeah, it's very hard to boss Susie.
Did you guys have a lot of family get-togethers, dinners, holidays,
Oh,
and
yes,
so on?
we did. And our grandparents were Orthodox Jews. My grandfather davened every morning, put on tefillin, was a longtime member of Beth Israel Synagogue, and his personal friend was Rabbi Nadoff for years and years. And I would have to say that the basis of our Judaism came from our mother's parents. Our Seders, our holidays, Passover and our Hanukkah parties and all that, we had wonderful memories, a wonderful time.
These had to be a lot of people, weren't
Oh,
they?
yes.
Oh, yeah.
When we had them, when we lived in that compound with our grandparents, there were probably, 20, 25 people in this little house for Seders, and we didn't skip a thing. I remember, we did not get to eat till about 9 o'clock at night, or later sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And you can imagine 14 kids
Yelling and screaming.
Well, we weren't yelling and screaming, but we were pretty anxious
Well,
at dinner.
It amazes me with the conveniences. When I do Passover now, I have 2 ovens, a microwave oven. It's amazing how my grandmother cooked everything from scratch, including her own. Remember, Grandpa used to get
Gefilte fish.
the carp and bring them home live, put them in the basement. He would kill them and clean them. And she would cook this huge dinner for all these people with one oven and one roaster.
And she did it all by herself.
She did it all by herself. Well, the daughters helped a
Maybe
little.
they helped some. But
They helped with the cleanup. She did all the cooking.
yeah, it was quite, we all waited every year because my grandfather would bring these big fish, live fish, home, and he put them in his basement in a big tank. And he'd bring them a few days before, so we all could come in and watch these fish swim in this tank. And like Susie said, he would kill the fish and prepare them. I remember my grandmother had a stove downstairs. Remember that?
Oh, she did. She had an old stove downstairs.
And that's where they cooked
Yeah.
the fish, because she wouldn't cook that fish
Yeah.
in her kitchen.
Yeah, she did. She had an old stove downstairs. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
What memories?
Yeah, we do. We really do have some great memories. Our grandmother, I think, our grandfather lived to be over 100 years old and lived in his own house and took care of himself.
The same house.
The same house that we're talking about on 33rd and Dewey. And our grandfather drove a car till he was about 94. He was an amazing man. Now, our grandfather retired very early. He made his money mostly from real estate property, right? But he worked at B.B. Runyon's for a while.
Well, before that, a place called L.G. Dopp.
Yeah,
He was a furniture
Sure.
finisher.
yeah.
And he finished furniture, and I think he
He
also
made-
was an upholsterer. He upholstered furniture.
Yeah, he always worked in furniture manufacturing. But then he was real smart. He saved all his money and he bought apartment houses. So he retired when he was, I don't ever remember him going to work.
Well, he retired about 50 at age 55.
He was in his 50s. He retired. And of course, he had income from his properties. He bought properties, apartment houses, took care of them, and that's how he had his income.
What do you remember about him as a person? How did he affect you guys, being with him, talking to him, and so on?
He was extremely loving. He loved the kids. He loved the grandkids. He loved to garden. He had prized tomatoes. In fact, Rabbi Nadoff used to go to his house all the time just to get his tomatoes. He was a very religious man. He cared deeply for America. He was thankful to be here.
Very patriotic.
Very patriotic. He was a simple man, but he made an impression, I think, on all of us. He definitely was the leader. The leader of, more so than Grandma.
Oh, yeah.
She was the homemaker and he was the leader. And his whole life probably revolved, like many people of his generation, revolved around his family.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did they meet, your grandparents?
Well, their families, I said earlier, his family knew her family in the old country. But they started dating here in Omaha, and my grandmother, Annie, was only 17 when she married my grandfather. And he was 21, I think.
Did they speak Yiddish in the house?
Oh, yes.
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 Did you guys pick up a little
Yeah,
bit of it?
expressions, not a lot.
Not a lot, but a little bit.
They did not speak Yiddish to their children or their grandchildren, but they
To
did
each
to each
other.
other. And we learned, the normal Yiddish phrases. Yeah, we did.
Now, another extended part of the family, before I forget this, my grandmother, she was one of 3 sisters, and her other sister was Ella,
Yeah.
and she married Frank
Frank
Katz, who lived in Omaha for many, many years, and they had
Parking lots.
3, well, yeah, but they had 3 children, and it's interesting because one of the grandchildren lives next door to Susie, Pam Friedlander.
Behind me.
And one of the other grandchildren, who are our second cousins, lives in Lincoln. His name is Marlon Weiss. He's a physician, and he happens to be my doctor.
Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of extended, and we're close to a lot of our parents' first cousins and their children.
And when we were young, I remember going over to their house often on Sunday and visiting with the Katzes.
Mm-hmm.
And we all used to get together on occasion, not so much at Passover, because they had a big family also.
Mm-hmm.
They had 3 children. I don't know how many. They had probably 9 or 10 grandchildren.
You guys mentioned, living close together and everything, and I wondered about, did the cousins see one another going into school and in school? And then how about the relatives, the aunts and the uncles? Did you see them often?
Well, as we got older, 2 of our aunts and uncles moved to California. But they would come home all the time, and it would be a big thing when the cousins came in from California, and we would visit back and forth often. And then our one aunt, well, she moved around a lot. She had 3 boys, our Aunt Rita Pellman. As we got older, like pre-teens, she had moved around a lot. She had lived in Wisconsin and Michigan and Illinois. But we had a very, very close family. And then, of course, as we got older and our kids, we started having our own kids. Steve and I have traveled to California for our cousins' children's bar mitzvahs, and we've traveled for weddings and whatnot. So even though we don't see each other now as often as we like, there still is that huge family bond between us. And of course, we went to grade school and high school with a lot of our cousins.
Steve, you mentioned about walking to school, going uphill both ways. Tell me about those trips back and forth.
Well, the thing I remember most is in the wintertime, as I recall, it was about 10 blocks to school. And I think the winter back then were much harsher than they are now. But I remember our parents never drove us to school. No one ever drove us to school. There were no buses. And Susie and I, we used to walk those 10 blocks in freezing cold and snow. But obviously we made it. And that's the one thing that really sticks out in my mind about that grade school is the walks during the cold weather back and forth.
This included going home for lunch too.
Yes,
Yes.
yes indeed. Yeah,
Yes.
we there were no lunches at school.
And we either walked or took buses. Every place. You took a bus to Hebrew school. I think Dad would pick you up at 6 o'clock when he got off
That's
work.
another thing I remember.
Yes.
Having to it took me 45 minutes on the bus to get to Hebrew school.
I think you had to
And-
transfer twice.
And I had to transfer twice, and I went Mondays and Thursdays, and then of course Saturdays and Sundays. Of course on Saturdays I used to get a ride to the synagogue with my grandfather, who used to always go. And on Sunday my dad would take me. But during the week I'd take that bus, and I remember that I rarely missed the time.
You guys mentioned that your dad had a grocery store, and didn't you say, Susie, they had several different stores?
They had, not at once. They only owned one store at a time, but they started out 16th and down by Carter Lake, wasn't it? Stop and Shop Grocery,
Yes.
North 16th.
North 16th Street.
And then they sold that, and Mother always, well, when I was about 7, Mother went to work with my father in the store. Then they owned one on, where else? 29th and DuPont.
No, well, yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah.
They owned a couple different ones. I can't remember all of them. But it was always, they always did it together. And my mother did all the advertising and was the checker. And my dad ran the meat department and did all the buying. And in those days, the grocery stores weren't open at night. And if you were open on Saturdays, you had to be closed on Sunday. So Sunday was a big family day for us. We'd go out to dinner and to a movie every Sunday when we were little, before we got into socializing in junior high school and high school, yeah.
Did you guys ever work in the grocery store?
Oh, yes.
We both did.
What was your jobs?
Sackers. I was a sacker,
Well,
What'd
I
you do?
worked, well, and I used to stock shelves
yeah.
and, yes, carry groceries to cars and carry them to customers' homes. I started working, I think, when I was about, I don't know, 11 or 12, and worked on Saturdays and then during the summer.
Yeah. We always worked during summers.
And you mentioned Sunday being a family day.
Oh, yes.
Where would you go out to dinner?
Cliffs.
Cliff's fried chicken. That was one of our favorite. And La Casa Pizza. We went to La Casa Pizza a lot.
And
What else?
the Blackstone.
The Blackstone Hotel. Oh, always the Blackstone Hotel.
As a family.
As a
Yes.
family. But sometimes then we would go, my parents had a social group where they were very friendly with a lot of other Jewish couples that owned small grocery stores too. And on Sundays, lots of times, we would spend the day with these couples and their kids.
Who were some of these couples?
There was Rose and Sam Garrett, the Taubes, Sarah and Leo Taub, and Maury and Manette Katz, and the Gitnicks.
That's
Nate
right.
and Annie
I
Gitnick.
think you had
They
them.
were all very close to my parents, and they all owned grocery stores. And lots of times on Sundays, we would go out to dinner with them and their kids.
So you got along good with those kids too.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And we eventually all went to the same high school. We all went to Central High.
Was there any peer pressure with first you, Steve, being the oldest, and then as it trickled down with the teachers comparing you? Or did they know you were related?
Oh, yeah, they knew because we were only two. I don't think there was ever any peer pressure between us. Maybe because he was a boy and I was a girl. And I don't remember any peer
I
pressure.
don't either.
No. And people would say to me, oh, you're Steve's little sister.
Oh, sure. You got a lot of that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Then how about your high school years? What were they like?
I think they were very typical of Jewish kids that went to school here in Omaha. We were both very active in AZA and BBG. I think socially, most of our friends were Jewish.
We hung out at the JCC.
We hung out at that's when the J was across the street from Central High School. And we hung out a lot at the J. And I think our social life was just, typical Jewish teenagers, very active in Jewish things.
Who were some of your friends while you were in high school and in the Jewish activities, the clubs and so on?
You want to go first?
You go ahead.
Well, I had a very unique situation. I was a member of a group. Well, I was a member of Eddie R. BBG, and I was one of the founding members. Along with 17 other girls, we dropped out of one Jewish organization and started this other one. And even today, we're scattered all over the United States. We girls are very, very close. In fact, on our 50th birthday, we went to, we rented a house in Vail for our 50th birthday. On our 60th birthday, we went to Laguna. And this September, we're going to Scottsdale, Arizona for our 65th birthday. And some of these girls are, well, my best friends were Nancy Rikus, Dee Dee Fogel, Marilyn Bernstein, Cookie Hoberman, Cookie Epstein Hoberman. There were 18 of us, but there were groups within the groups, but we were all one big happy family.
And how about you, Steve?
Well, I didn't have as large a group as Susie did, but in high school, my best friends were Mike Platt, who still lives in Omaha, Eddie Wintrope, John Oken, Clark Schwartz, Marshall Bernstein. Many of them are still around, and many of us started the University of Nebraska together, and were Sammys. Eddie Wintrope was, John Oken, Mike Platt started there. There were 4 of us that did. And as we got through college, some of the other guys, I know that Mike and Eddie, they transferred to Ohio State, and Mike Platt dropped out of school.
John transferred. with
Oh,
Eddie.
that's right, that's
Yeah.
right. Eddie and John, I'm sorry, transferred to Ohio State. And then, as it turns out, Eddie and John and I all went to law school. Eddie and John went to Creighton, and I went to UNL.
It's kind of an unusual thing, wasn't it, in Omaha? The Jewish kids, how they were all one big group.
Well, you got to understand something. In those days, if you were Jewish, you went to Central. And with the Jewish Community Center being right across the street, so we knew everybody because all the Jewish kids went to one high school. Now, when my children were in high school, it wasn't like that because we had Central, we had West Side, we had Burke, we had the Millard schools. So my kids didn't have the same kind of high school experience with Jewish kids, although there were tons of Jews at Burke, and my kids were raised at Temple, so they had those relationships through religious school, but they did not go to high school with every other Jew in town like we did. It was a unique situation back then in the 50s.
Steve, are you still close friends with some of your contemporaries from high school?
Yeah, we still see each other, not as often as we'd like, but I see Mike Platt several times a year, and I see Eddie occasionally and John Oken occasionally. But we don't see each other as much as I'd like. As you get older, everybody gets family and has their own separate interests. It's really hard to maintain a close relationship.
And Susie, after high school, did you go on to the university?
Yes, I went to University of Arizona in Tucson.
Did you graduate?
I didn't graduate it. I went 3 years, and actually I got married during my junior year, which took me to another state, and I never finished. I was married once before for a short time to my college sweetheart, and then that didn't work out. Then I moved back to Omaha, and that's when I started dating Mike and married him.
And how many children do you have?
I have 2 kids, a son who's now 39, and he's married and has 2 children of his own, and they live in Houston, Texas. And our son works for Citigroup. He's a managing director of Citigroup. And then we have a single daughter who's 31, and she lives in New York City, and she works in public relations. She does healthcare public relations. They both have great jobs, and they're great kids.
And Steve, I know you have one daughter,
One daughter.
and she's the librarian.
Yes, she's a librarian. She's 30 years old, just a year younger than Susie's Tracy.
Our girls went to This was a unique situation. Our girls went to the same university. My daughter started at American University. They're a year apart. And when Shannon was a senior in high school, she came to visit Tracy, fell in love with the campus. She applied and she got accepted. So both our girls went to American University and they both graduated from there. And they both spent a junior year abroad, right? Didn't Shannon?
Let's touch a little bit more on your father's side of the family.
Okay. Well, our dad was Nate Seglin. We don't know too much about the Seglins. We do know that both our grandfather and grandmother Seglin came from around the area, Minsk, Russia. Now, our grandmother was Bessie Richards. And my father has a lot of first cousins. That all that Richards clans, that Richard clan, was my father's first cousin. Mort Richards, Jaime Richards, Yale Richards, Sam Rice, Joe Rice. These were all my father's first cousins. The only thing we knew about our grandfather, our paternal grandfather, Zadie Seglin, died when Steve and I think I was 3 and you were about 5. I don't remember him at all. But I think they were relatively poor. They weren't as successful as our other grandfather. My grandfather Seglin was a peddler, I believe, wasn't he?
That's right.
Yeah. And my dad was the youngest. He had a brother named Aaron who died when my dad was 10. And then my dad had an older sister, Tilly, who was married first to Sam Brown and then Alex Plotkin. And she just had one son. So my dad's family was very small compared to my mother's side.
Do you ever see any of these members of the family on your father's side?
Oh, yes, yes. We see, I personally am close with Marvin Richards and his wife Bobby, and I see Joni Radaziner periodically, and when Yale Richards was alive, Steve and I saw him periodically, and that's about it.
The Richards family was a huge family.
Yeah.
In fact, one of them, this was several years ago, remember, did a genealogy of the family, and it was spread all over the United States, several different branches. Huge family.
Yes, this girl in our family, we didn't even know her, but Yale organized this. He had the whole Richards clan over to his house, and we all sent pictures and told of experience, and she made a tree, a Richards family tree, and we all had the opportunity to purchase it if we wanted to. It was kind of interesting.
It was.
Yeah.
I look at it from time to time.
I have 2 children. Of course, they're the lights of my life. They're both, I'm being a little prejudiced here, they're both great kids. My kids, unlike Steve and I, who were only 2 years apart, my children are almost 8 years apart. And so it was almost like raising 2 different families. When Tracy was 10, her brother was off to college. And after that, we didn't see him too much because, of course, he had his own life. But they're very, very close, even to this day. They go on family vacations together, and they visit each other all the time. Our son, Todd, as I said earlier, went to Burke High School. Then he went off to the University of Texas, and he studied business. His first job after he graduated the University of Texas, he went to work in Houston for Shell Oil Company. While he was working at Shell, he got a master's degree in finance, and as soon as he got his master's degree, he left Shell and went to work for the Bank of Nova Scotia. He had a great career with them. He lived in Venezuela for a while, and then he was approached by Citigroup to come work for them. What he does is he's a corporate investor and a corporate lender. He lends money to, his expertise is he lends money to oil companies. He married 10 and a half years ago to a girl that he had met in school, but he never dated her in school. Actually, he was in a class with her roommate, and that's how he met her. But they started dating after they both had graduated from the University of Texas. And she's a great gal. She's a great mother. She's a great wife. She has a master's degree in education, early childhood education. But when she started having her own kids, she quit teaching, and she's a stay-at-home mom, and she raises their 2 children. I have a grandson, 5, his name's Eli, and a granddaughter, Blythe. She's 3. My daughter, Tracy, who was a really feisty character, she has red hair, and bright red curly hair, and as I said before, she was 8 years younger than her brother. We didn't plan it like this. We just had an easier time getting Todd and a more difficult time getting Tracy. And we kind of called Tracy our miracle baby. Tracy was born 9 weeks early and only weighed 3 pounds 7 ounces at birth. She had a 50-50 chance of surviving her birth, but she was a strong little cookie, and thank God she's with us today. She at one time fell below 3 pounds. She was in the hospital for about 2 months, came home, had pneumonia, had to go back to the hospital, but that's why we call her our little miracle baby. It was, they were shocked when she was born that she didn't have the Heimlich membrane disease like the Kennedy baby had with the undeveloped lungs. Her lungs were okay, so her main problem at birth was just being small. So, but she grew up, and she grew up fast, and she was a very bright, self-motivated, independent child. She got a Dean's Scholarship to American University. She was there 4 years. She studied for a semester in London, her junior year. After Tracy graduated, she got a job with the American Diabetes Association, a nonprofit institution, and she started working for them. She did public relations for them, and she was there a year when she decided to follow her boyfriend to New York. And I said, "Don't do it, Tracy. Don't go to New York unless you have a job. Don't quit your other job." And she said, "Oh, I already quit my other job." She said, "Don't worry, I'll get a job." And I was very nervous. I said, "You're going to starve to death in New York." But Tracy's a very determined young woman, and she arranged to have 4 interviews, and she got 3 offers. So she got a job with a public relations firm, and she stayed with them for a while, and then she left that firm, and now she works for a firm called Weber Shadwick, and they are actually under the Bozell and Jacobs umbrella. And what she does healthcare public relations, and she's been promoted now to be the vice president of her division. She does public relations for pharmaceutical companies, such as Merck and Pfizer. She does a lot of traveling. She's a very hard-working young woman. She's quite athletic. She's now training to run in the New York Marathon. She's climbs glaciers. She does bungee jumping off the Alps in Switzerland. She's an amazing young woman. They're both hardworking kids. I think they get that from their father. They have a strong work ethic, and both my kids are very self-motivated, and I'm not too proud of them. But that's my family, Todd and Tracy.
And Steve, tell me about your daughter.
Well, she graduated from the University, American University in Washington, D.C., and then she worked on Capitol Hill for 2 years for a subcommittee of the House of Representatives, and then she went on to get her master's degree in library science at the University of Pittsburgh. And after she got that, she started out as a librarian in a public school, and then she transferred over to librarian for the public library, and she's now a public children's specialist in a public library in Vienna, Virginia.
In closing, I would just like to say that how much I love my family. My husband, Mike Mogul, my son Todd, his wife Leslie, their 2 children, Eli and Blythe, and my daughter Tracy. I hope that my grandchildren, the 2 I have, and I hope to have some more someday, I hope they have the kind of happiness and closeness of family that my brother Steve and I had. I hope that they keep their our children are very, very close, and I hope that their children will be very, very close.
In closing, I would like to tell my wife, Barbara, how much I love her. We've been married, will be this August, will be 47 years. And my daughter, Shannon, how much I love her. And wish her, like my sister said, that when she has a family, it will be a close family like we had.